Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our interview with Ryan Napoleone. Ryan is a Director, Product Governance, Risk and Compliance at Resolver, which is a company enabling leading global organizations to transform risk management into risk intelligence. So risk intelligence will be our main topic today. So Ryan, thank you very much for joining us for our Risk Management Show podcast interview.
Of course, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to go through this, and yeah, absolutely, thank you.
All right, thank you again. And so after having interviews with some of your colleagues, Amanda Cohen and Will Anderson, we are pleased to invite you as a product manager. So Ryan, could you tell us firstly a short story about your career path, what brought you to where you are right now, and what you guys at Resolver are up to these days?
Yeah, absolutely. So my path to Resolver into the software world was through industry and through having some background in the GRC space. So I started out my career in the Big Four at Deloitte, doing in their risk advisory practice. So by education, by trade, I'm an accountant, and went through the process and spent the beginning of my career at Deloitte doing that. And then got to a point where I was looking to do something different. I knew that I wanted to do something outside of the consulting path, and whether that was going into industry or potentially going into a software role. And that's the role that's the path I ended up choosing. Started off with Resolver about 5 years ago. Started doing implementations and with our group that does some awesome work there, and then gradually transitioned into product, overseeing some of our GRC applications as a product manager, and recently as the director of that product line, and really driving that business forward for Resolver. What we're up to these days, again, Resolver is a risk intelligence software platform. So and we'll get into a little bit of that later on, but we have a full suite of GRC products, and from enterprise risk management, regulatory compliance, internal audit, internal controls over financial reporting, third-party risk, and a couple others. And we work across with our GRC function, and also tie into corporate security and a whole slew of other things since Resolver was acquired by Kroll earlier on last year. So yeah, there's no shortage of things that we're up to right now, but it's all
okay. We will figure out piece by piece. So I believe we will have a thoughtful conversation on the topic of risk intelligence. That's what you put in your main description of your company. So Ryan, can you explain the concept of risk intelligence and its significance in creating value for organizations? And what are the key differences between risk management and risk intelligence?
Yeah, thank you. So risk intelligence is a concept that just goes beyond traditional risk management practices. It's really an evolution. So risk management focuses on identifying, assessing, mitigating risks, and risk intelligence takes that a step further by providing strategic insights to have better informed decision making and create value for organizations. So that's understanding the interconnectedness of risk, the potential impact on its objectives, and opportunities that it may present. So we're looking at not just the downside and inward facing part of risk, but we're looking at the upside that risk presents as well. So as I mentioned, the difference is maybe not the way to describe it. I think of it more as just an evolution, and that lies in kind of the scope and purpose. So risk management, again, primarily concerned on minimizing negative impact of risks, and it's that inward facing look, whereas risk intelligence aims to optimize decision making and proactively identify opportunities to leverage risk and drive strategic initiatives. And just basically, how does risk impact what we're looking to accomplish as a business? So it encompasses that broader perspective that goes beyond mitigation and into your objectives. And the last thing I'll say on that point is that what we've noticed with our customers is that there's a disconnect between the risk functions and the business, and risk intelligence, ultimately, we want to look to close that gap. We hear so frequently from risk practitioners of the mantra of like getting a seat at the table, and this is this is one of the ways to close that gap and really have risk as a strategic enabler for their organizations.
Mm-hmm. So, in the context of risk intelligence, how can organizations gain valuable insights from other risk data? Are there any specific tools or techniques?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a variety of different techniques and tools. Technology obviously plays a crucial role in enabling that, and some specific approaches kind of from end to end. One is going to be for risk. Uh, you can ingest data from all different kinds of sources. Risk is going to exist and it's going to lie in all different parts of your organization, and you want to be able to pull from all different systems or different sources that you're getting information from. This can be from existing parts of your business, your ERP systems, et cetera, and then also a little bit more focused on the risk side. You can pull data from, you've got incident reports, different types of assessments, audit findings, other external or third-party sources to get that holistic view of the risk landscape. On the, I mentioned the incident side. That's one that I think that risk teams particularly don't do enough to integrate into their processes. And what that does is, if you're tracking incidents and tying that into your risk processes, you're tracking materialized risk, and that holds a lot of power in collecting and categorizing the different data. And by then bringing that in and connecting those quantifiable events to your risk program, you can really substantiate the value of of your efforts and what you're doing as a risk professional to the executive stakeholders. And on that concept of connecting, that's kind of the next step. We've brought all the data in, now let's connect and enrich it. So by integrating the data from different sources and enriching it with that relevant contextual information, organizations can then, we can establish those meaningful relationships and start to look at trends, patterns, correlation, again, really start to move towards that intelligence side of things. And then the last bit, we've brought it in, we've connected it all. We have to analyze and output on it with reporting, and that, whether that's using reporting, business intelligence, software tools. That's when we can look at things like trend analysis, whether that's just your risk analysis, something like a key risk indicator, whether that's leading or lagging, and generate reports and dashboards that are going to give actionable insight to the decision makers at your organization. So again, all that tools like risk management software, business intelligence platforms, and different data visualization tools can all help facilitate those processes. And again, what we're looking there is to analyze the data, interpret it, and then drive decision making and help the decision makers at your organizations make informed calls on things.
Fantastic. So, for example, if we take the life of a risk manager, if there is one thing that they should start prioritizing right now that they are not doing currently, what would it be?
Yeah, if there's one thing that the risk managers today should prioritize, I think it's looking back at and really embracing that strategic approach to risk management. Think of risk management as something that is going to enrich resource allocation. And again, I keep hammering home this point on decision making, but really want to put that in and focusing on it's going to enrich that at your organization. So we did have a customer that on like the resource allocation decision making side, they had an executive call out a very point blank question. They looked at a risk report and they're like, "What's yellow mean? What does that mean?" And I think as risk practitioners, we lean on that and too much on just the visualization side of it. And in their case, they're like, if yellow means, does yellow have a dollar amount associated to it? If I don't take care of that yellow thing, what then happens later on? So focusing on like your outputs and your risk management program, helping with those decision making and resource allocation processes, rather than solely focusing on mitigating risks. We really want to align the efforts with objectives and strategic initiatives at the organization. So there's a couple ways to look at that and think of it. Again, you're integrating that into the decision-making process. And one action that we can do on this theme of being integrated to the strategy and objectives of your organization, talk to your CRO or your other exec sponsor and see how your team can get involved. Again, I mentioned the seat at the table piece earlier. Your exec sponsor is the closest one to this. They may even already have that literal seat at the table. We've got another customer who's their CRO really fought hard for them to be included, for at least the outputs from their team to be included in the monthly executive committee meeting, so that risk gets really ingrained in risk culture. And I think we'll talk about risk culture a little bit later, but it starts to get the rest of the team visibility and show that you're that strategic enabler in the organization. The second
Yeah.
one, engaging with your stakeholders and promoting collaboration. Again, you want to prioritize that inclusiveness and stakeholder engagement, collaborating across the different functions. It's going to demonstrate that value to them, and you can start to drive the culture a little bit to help promote those risk-informed decisions. Similar team to the CRO example I mentioned before, they actually have their different second line groups. This is interesting. It's a very in the literal sense. The second line groups are assigned to different first line groups. So the risk teams will sit physically in the office, like very close to the teams that they support. So there's a lot more of that informal engagement. And again, you're taking those steps to being that strategic enabler by working with them directly. And then the last piece is again on this, we want to be considering how we're using technology to streamline those processes, enhance data collection, and again, allow them to automate and streamline a bit of those processes so we can focus on the strategic activities and value add. And that process happens over time. So with technology, you want to have something that's going to grow and evolve with you over time. You don't have to like flip the switch and you're like, okay, risk intelligence, strategic objectives, great, we're good to go right away. There's going to be a process with it. And there's change management that we want to be able to foster that and move along with it. And an example that we've seen from some customers is risk management is largely driven on like financial reporting cycles for like high level reporting, and quarterly reporting is always going to have its place, but it doesn't have to be the only thing that you're doing. So there can be the focus from moving from that quarterly reporting with the lagging data, the backwards facing data, to looking at some real-time risk tracking so that risk managers today can again focus on the strategy and objectives of the organization and how our work as risk practitioners impacts that.
All right, fantastic. So you mentioned risk culture. So let's dig a little bit deeper. So risk culture is often mentioned as a critical aspect of effective risk management. So can you elaborate on the importance of this, developing risk intelligence within organizations?
Yeah, it's critical, really, and it's something that I feel very strongly about. That risk practitioners need to encourage risk awareness and ownership throughout the organization. That strong culture is going to foster a sense of responsibility and accountability for risk throughout the organization. I won't. There's some on like it doesn't have to lie all within the risk team. We want to empower individuals to identify, assess, mitigate, work on things proactively, and contribute to an overall more robust risk management program. On that, we really want to promote open communication and a positive culture from our risk perspective. We want to have an environment where individuals feel comfortable sharing and reporting on incidents. We've talked to some customers about incident tracking, particularly recently, and that was one of their biggest barriers, is that they weren't getting anything through because there was no culture of submitting it, because people thought they were going to get in trouble if they spotted something or put out an incident. So that's a key part of it. It may sound kind of juvenile, elementary, but really like we want to make sure that you're there to not get people in trouble. You want to be able to work with them and do what's best for the organization and everyone in general. So with that, like the risk culture is going to support those informed decision making. The way that decisions are made, like that risk aware culture, is going to ensure that risks are embedded into those processes and considered with strategic decisions, and you're going to enable better informed choices. And again, you're going to moving towards that risk intelligence side of things. And as far as helping that from a culture perspective, you're making people's lives easier. You're helping them make better decisions, and ultimately that's going to be better for each department that you're working with. So that helps with that conversation and driving that really positive and collaborative risk culture. And then the final thing I'll mention on that is a a strong culture of continuous learning and improvement. We want to be iterative and keep progressing and moving forward. Again, we don't want to flip the switch and go from management to intelligence. It's just not going to happen. But we want to encourage people to review, update their practices, adapt to the changing landscape, and continuously enhance risk intelligence capabilities. There are different risk functions, and in the traditional like GRC sense, where some functions are a bit better than this. I think in the more in kind of like the compliance, audit, internal control space, sometimes those functions can slip up on risk culture more so than like risk management is as like a ERM ORM function, maybe a little bit less of an issue in that case. But things like second line internal control or financial reporting, regulatory compliance, they can absolutely be especially on the ICFR side, internal process consultants. Like testing and compliance is just one part of the job, but there's so much more that you can do in those ICFR functions to be consultative. Internal audit's a bit different because obviously with reporting lines and independence, but I still think that the audit plans and things that we're doing there should focus on objectives throughout the organization. And there's lots of great literature out there on objective-based auditing, and be working with your audit clients on like the communication and consultative side of it. We want to give people recommendations, not just slap people with a finding and say like go fix it. Be a strategic partner, work with them, because ultimately, whether it's audit, internal control, regulatory compliance, ERM, ORM, any other risk function, the risk culture is what sets the foundation for developing risk intelligence in an organization and getting that risk awareness, open communication, and driving that culture of continuous improvement within risk.
Mm-hmm. All right. So very thorough explanation. So I would like to ask you a personal point of view. What are the major misconceptions in the field of risk intelligence that you strongly disagree with?
Yeah, I think it ties a little bit. I almost went into this a little bit more in depth earlier, but one of the biggest misconceptions is that because it is on the job title, that risk management is solely the responsibility of a risk function or like a specific team, and that's it. That's the be all end all. Risk management and risk intelligence is a collective effort that involves all levels of the organization. It's not just one team's job, one department's job, it's everyone's responsibility. And to tie that back to the culture, what we see from our customers on this front is that the high maturity, our high maturity customers will actually have way more people, multiples more people that are in the first line functions that are going into the tool and engaging and updating. The frequency is different. Obviously, there's people who live and breathe this every day, but having people engage with a software tool from the first line and getting that cadence of thinking about risk is really powerful. And that's how we see our higher maturity customers get everyone engaged from that perspective. Again, we want to foster that culture where risk management is integrated into daily activities and all of your strategic processes for every individual, not just for the risk team and not just at those exco meetings. And there's a sliding scale. And again, this is a process and all of that is going to take time. But if we're empowering employees to identify and assess risks, we can tap into the wealth of insights of every single level and the experiences of everyone that contribute to that more comprehensive and effective risk management approach. So, and the last thing here is that even that's more between like getting everyone in the organization involved, but even from that front, there's collaboration that's required between different risk functions. We're talking, again, all the groups I've mentioned before, risk compliance, internal audit, et cetera. Each of those teams specifically brings a unique perspective and expertise that when you combine that with each other and with the first line and all those levels of the organization, that enhances the org's ability to identify, assess, respond to risks, and really enhance their level of risk intelligence.
All right. So Ryan, how do you see the future of risk intelligence evolving, and what is your company's approach to innovation? Maybe you can also elaborate what something your team at Resolver have recently achieved that you're kind of very proud of?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's as far as things that we're proud of, I'll get into the future approach and some different innovations and that as far as what we're proud of, I mean I mentioned earlier the acquisition by Kroll earlier last year. Kroll acquired us, and I've been really proud with how the team has integrated and embraced that, and we've started to launch some different applications and use cases where we're working directly with Kroll practitioners and getting that subject matter expertise even further embedded into our tool. And then the other thing that I've been really proud of um, is some of the customer stories that we've been able to really dive into. Getting customers their recognition internally at their organizations, that's again that's a part of this risk management to risk intelligence journey. But it's amazing to see some external validation from customers. We have one example, Farm Credit Canada, who recently won a best in class GRC award for some of the work that they've done with us, and that sparked off of some internal efficiencies that they got from taking their risk management process from effectively weeks, months to days of updating their assessment processes, and that's where they're getting more into focusing on that value add part of risk management. And some other customers that we've got a risk manager at Aston Spready at Vitality in a health insurance provider in the UK, and he recently won a risk manager award in Europe. And it's really cool to see our customers that what the output of them using Resolver and actually and getting that experience and recognition externally because of all the great work that they've been able to do with the tool. And on the innovation side of things, the future of risk intelligence and is really there's going to be a lot of enhancements driven by technology and the growing recognition of the strategic value it brings to organizations. There's a few different trends that we see. One is really enhanced business intelligence and visualizations. As organizations continue to collect these vast amounts of data, and I mentioned before, it's critical to bring them in from all different parts of your ecosystem. Advanced analytics techniques are going to play a critical role in extracting meaningful insights from this data, and having risk intelligence platforms that leverage those to provide more accurate and detailed assessments and to really drill down and get those insights and intelligence from your data. Another area that I think that I see us going into is real-time risk monitoring. I mentioned that a little bit earlier, but the shift to real-time risk monitoring is going to enable organizations to proactively identify and respond to risks as they arise. Whether that's real-time data integration, more automation in your risk alerts, and customizable dashboards, it's going to empower organizations to make faster informed decisions and ultimately move faster because they don't have this lag in reporting and decision making that they're waiting to get all this data before they do something. Again, the quarterly reporting is going to have its role, but we have to understand that sometimes things move so fast now that by the time you're at your quarterly reporting, something could be remediated, and we've missed addressing that altogether, or not necessarily remediated, but something could change on the risk landscape, and we're not looking at live data anymore. Integration of risk and strategy, and this is something that we see that I see kind of across the board, and it's industry by industry and different geographies. There's different maturities, and a lot of that's driven by regulation today. Financial institutions are really strong in the risk space because of the heavy regulation around it, and then different geographic regions as well. But I believe that risk intelligence is increasingly going to become an integral part of strategic decision making. As organizations become focused on aligning risk management to their overall business objectives, that's going to enable that holistic approach to risk management and fostering that risk intelligence culture. A couple others just on the future, a little bit more exciting things. I think that The quantification of risk is an interesting one. There's some on whether you're looking at scenario analysis and planning on that side. There's some obviously some regulation that could be coming on that front, but how enterprise and operational risk teams adopt that moving forward is really interesting, and look at in financial institutions in particular, look to some of their counterparts in more quantitative areas that may have already been doing that. And then two last things here. One is connecting and collaborating with experts. I mentioned already that we've seen some really interesting integration with Kroll on that front. And the last one, probably the most exciting one, and that I kind of buried the lead on this a little bit, but is emerging technology, AI and ML models to enrich your risk program and to really be an assistant to what you're doing. There's a variety of different ways that that I think that we can go forward as a risk management industry on that. There's going to be a large amount of complex data that we're dealing with always with risk, whether that's our own risk data, regulatory changes, et cetera. And there's lots of opportunity there. And also summarizing inputs from your risk assessments, whether that's large amounts of data from the first line or all other sources to help you reporting and write some of those reports for you and help from a summarization perspective. And the last bit, identify different connections across your risk universe, whether that's across your different risks, controls, regulations, findings, et cetera. There's a lot there on in the AI and ML space that's really exciting and where we can move forward with it.
All right, this is very expensive list of future projects. So if we summarize, we have only last time for one question. If we summarize our interview, if someone who's listening to this interview would like to walk away with one or two major takeaways, what would it be?
I think we go back to the guidance that I was given to risk managers before. If there's one thing you could do today to understand and help move from risk management to risk intelligence, I would take a look back at your program and see what's our connection to the objectives and strategy of our organization. That's going to drive a lot of value for your team, not just from a internal recognition perspective, but for the organization. And really take a look back at that and pitch that, I think, to your internal stakeholders and say, if we're not doing something here, it's something we need to do, because ultimately it's going to benefit everyone across the organization. It's going to take us from risk management to risk intelligence, help our business move faster, make stronger decisions, and really get to where we want to be.
All right, fantastic, Ryan. That was very explicative, and I hope that our users and listeners will take a lot of value from this interview. So again, thank you for your time, and I hope we will continue working with you guys to have another kind of lens to all this risk management profession.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Boris, and I'd love to come on anytime you'd have me. So thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Okay, bye bye.